Okay, so today we're going over the disparities in exposure to surrounding greenness related to the proportion of the population that were immigrants to the United States. And that's kind of a long title, so we'll go over it later. But so the main questions, how does greenness, quote unquote greenness, contribute to the health differences between immigrants and those born in the US? And then what is the correlation between health and greenness in immigrant populations? So what does greenness like entail? What does it actually mean? So greenness in this study refers to the amount of photosynthetic vegetation or nature in an area on Earth. It's measured by satellite remote sensing, and it's an important determinant of health. So a lot of studies find positive correlation between higher levels of greenness and health. If you're in an area, or if you live in an area with really good levels of greenness around you, say like Seattle or Washington, there's a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease and obesity, and improvements to mental health, and it also reduces harm from heat and air population. So the methods that they use, some of their main goals are trying to measure the association between immigrant proportions in the US and the greenness that they live in or around, trying to like measure immigrant populations' health, mental and physical health. And then their secondary goal, trying to assess if association differed by the immigrant's continent or continental subregion of origin. So if like or continents, um, if the association with greenness like is different. Say like Latin American populations have more of a negative association with greenness than European populations do, kind of like mapping out where those populations usually settle or like what environments those populations usually settle into in the US. So they obtained immigrant data from the US Census. They got a proportion of immigrants from Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, Latin America, and Oceania. I don't know how to say that. But, anyways, the surrounding greenness was assessed through the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, which is through satellite imagery. There's this whole process that they describe in the paper, but that's kind of confusing. They basically use the spatial error regression to estimate the association between immigrant percentage in that area and the NDVI, or the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, in 2000 and 2010, because those are the years the US Census recorded these populations. So some of the results, their census tracts with higher overall immigrant percentage had significantly lower greenness. And that was recorded in all 9 census regions that they studied in 2000 as well as 2010. So areas with higher immigrant percentages lived in like lower greenness areas, which definitely contribute to their physical and mental health or whatever issues they have or like they're going through. The largest significant negative association occurred in the Pacific, followed by the New England census region, and the smallest significant negative associations were in the mountain and east south central census regions. And here's a picture of what they're talking about. So this is the year 2000 and the year 2010. So the highest negative associations are in the Pacific and New England. Same with here, Pacific and New England. And the lowest negative associations happen in the central areas of the US, as in like these are the areas with quote unquote more greenery, more like landscape nature, photosynthetic vegetation. Um, so what does this mean? This suggests that immigrants tended to live in areas with lower surrounding greenness compared to whoever was born in the US. Um, the like high immigrant populations plus low greenness exposure was most consistent across census regions with a high Latin American population. So saying high Latin American populations were exposed to lower greenness. They just live in areas with lower greenness. Higher immigrant populations plus higher greenness exposure was most consistent across census regions with a high European population. So whoever was from Europe tended to settle in areas with high greenness exposure, which contributes to their mental and physical health. So this is just a representation. It represents a difference in average greenness scaled to the interquartile quartile like region or whatever of the NVDI per IQR difference in the census tract immigration proportion from specific subregions. So you can kind of see like Latin American population so health outcomes found that a higher surrounding greenness is associated with increased rates of outdoor physical activity, increased risk of being overweight, decreased risk of having depressive symptoms, and decreased risk of adverse birth outcomes, which are very important and life-changing health outcomes. Um, and limitations of the study, it didn't accurately distinguish between different types of green space, such as like recreational areas, which promote physical activity and social cohesion. It kind of just measured whatever was like green or retracted some certain light. So, like distinguishing between these spaces are some um, areas that they want to improve on for further studies. And that is my presentation.